So occasionally I like to take a few weeks to talk about the mission of our local church. I recognize as a pastor that all churches, we have the same mission. That's to share the good news of Jesus Christ. That's to go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth, being effective witnesses of his gospel. But sometimes there's uniques, or there's ways in which we approach it that really define us as a church. If someone came to you and said, "What is your church about?" or "Describe your church," some will respond with very physical things, like "We're the church with the blue roof by the railroad tracks." Others will respond with the things that we've been doing. We're the church that's been doing Taco Tuesday, or the church that has the after-school program, or those different identifiers. And still others will identify it by the people. These are the ones who come to the church. It's so-and-so's church. It's this person's church. But the question truly is a powerful question. All of those are appropriate descriptors, but I think there's a concise way for us to speak about who we are as a church. When I was a young minister, just here a few years, and I went to a meeting and there was a speaker and he was talking about vision and mission. And it was something that I knew about, but something that I never really embraced. I'd seen churches that had these mission statements, but nothing seemed to align with the mission on the wall. And so I just kind of avoided it. And as I was driving home, I thought, Lord, I want to lead effectively. And so help me know what the mission for your church, specifically your church in Crawford, Nebraska, is. And he spoke some truth into my life. And man, I was ready. I was running. I thought it was incredible. I came home and I started to look up other church mission statements, and I saw something pretty incredible. My thought wasn't very unique. My vision, the word that I feel like God gave us for his mission for our church, was a pretty common mission. But just because it was common, it didn't change how profound and how purposeful it was for us here. I felt like God spoke to me. The mission of the church in Crawford, Nebraska is to love God and to love people. Over time, I realized there was a visionary aspect to that I wanted to add. We love God and we love people to make an impact in our world. That's why we exist in Crawford, Nebraska. If someone says, "Who is the church in Crawford, Nebraska?" I want us to be the church who loves God. That's our mission. Who loves people. That's our mission. Who impact the world. That's our vision. It sounds similar to the church in Acts. Acts chapter 2 says every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes. They ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God, enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. The early church, the church in Acts 2, the end of Acts 2, you read about that church. You see a church that was dedicated to the apostles' teaching, to prayer, to signs and wonders. They were dedicated. They loved God, and they were dedicated to each other. They broke bread. They shared what they had in common. And they saw what? Vision. They saw impact. The Lord added to their numbers daily those who were being saved. Over the next few weeks, I want to break down the parts of that vision. I think most people, if you ask them, "Do you love God?" Most people, if you came up to them and you said, "Do you love God?" almost unanimously, people would respond with yes. But I think if you asked a follow-up question to that, how? How do you love God? It might cause people to struggle to answer a little bit. That how question. God, how do we as finite humans love the infinite God? How do we express that love? How do we demonstrate that love? What does that love look like? Sonnet 43 by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She's talking about her love for man. And she's saying, "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways." I wonder if we should ask that question. God, how do I love you? Let me list the ways. For some, it's hard to quantify our love for a person, let alone impossible to conceptualize the expression of our love to God. Listen to what Jesus says in the book of John about loving God, what the expression of this love looks like. John chapter 14, "If you love me, keep my commands. Whoever has my commands and keeps them is the one who loves me. The one who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I too will love them and show myself to them." Jesus replied, "Anyone who loves me will obey my teaching. My Father will love them, and we will come to them, and we will make our home with them. Anyone who does not love me will not obey my teaching. These words you hear are not my own. They belong to the Father who sent me. John chapter 15, that chapter that he talks about, I am the vine and you are the branches. Remain in me and I in you. He's talking about the beauty of the relationship of us and him. In verse 9, he says, as the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. How compelling is it that the instruction for loving, the reality of love, is expressed through the obedience of man? Our obedience to God reflects our love unto him. Jesus said it several times in John chapter 14 and 15. You know, Jesus is approached in the Gospels by religious leaders. They ask him a question. One of the teachers in the law, they came and heard him debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, of all the commandments, which is the most important? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is love your neighbor as yourself. There's no commandment greater than these. These were powerful words. Jesus has asked the question, what is the greatest of all the commandments? You know, I talked a little bit last week about delighting and meditating in the law, and how in contemporary Christianity that can be burdensome to us. When we think of the law, we think of something that's heavy, something that binds us. We don't see freedom in the law. But the reality was the law was the expression of covenant relationship from God to the Israelites. The words that Jesus is speaking right here, as he's speaking to these religious leaders, it's a direct quote from the book of Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy chapter 5, God is downloading the commandments on Moses. We see the 10 commandments in that chapter. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, he speaks very similar words to the ones that Jesus spoke. These are the commands, the decrees, and laws the Lord your God directed me to teach you to observe in the land you're crossing the Jordan to possess, so that you, your children, and their children after them may fear the Lord your God as long as you live, by keeping all his decrees and commands that I give you, and so that you may enjoy long life. Hear, Israel, and be careful to obey, so that it may go well with you, that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. The instruction to love God was directly tied with his covenant commandments that he gave his people. From a commentary I read, love the Lord your God. These words are central to the book of Deuteronomy. They're the core of God's entire revelation through Moses to the Israelites. Jesus taught that they constitute the greatest commandment of the law. This mutual relationship between Israel and God was at the heart of covenant, which was about to be renewed under Moses' leadership. Moses is expressing the key to relationship is obedience to the law. Obedience isn't this burdensome opportunity, but it's the opportunity to engage or position ourselves for the love of the Father. I want to be in position to experience his presence. I want to be in position to hear his voice. The law was what positioned man to experience God. There were some key concepts in those verses from Deuteronomy. First, he said, fear the Lord. That's to honor, to revere, and respect. In the Amplified, it says, fear and worship the Lord your God in all filled reverence and profound respect. God proclaimed he is one. That is, he is whole. He is complete. He is preeminent. One is the first number. It is the primary number that everything follows. He establishes his nature. He says, love me with all your heart. That's your inner man, your mind, your will, and your heart. Love me with all your soul. That's your living being, your desires, and your passions, and all your strength. That's your force. That's your abundance. And then it's a word that in Hebrew is often interpreted as very. There's an interpretation that I read on a website by Jason DeRucci. And he said, the word usually means very. What would it mean to love the Lord your God with veriness? Interestingly, the Greek translation of this word is power. Aramaic is wealth. Both of these may be pointing in the same direction. For the strength of a person is not simply who a person is, but what he has at his disposal. If Moses calls us to love Yahweh with our hearts, then moves out to our being, could our veriness, this is still this quote, be one step bigger and include all our resources? The very things we had. In Deuteronomy chapter 1, we read the story of creation. On the last day of creation, God looks at his creation and he calls it very good. It's almost as though God is saying, love with what is in you, love with all that you are, and love with everything that comes from you. The abundance, the resources, the things that are around you, your value, your worth, all that you have. Make it one. The Lord your God is one. Love him with everything that you are. Remember, Israel struggled with loving other gods or compartmentalizing things. No, he said, I want your heart. I want your mind. I want your strength. I want your soul. I want all of you to love me. Seems like a logical request. We love God because he first loved us. That's in 1 John chapter 4 if you want to read it. You know, he demonstrated his love to us. This is in Romans chapter 5, that while we were sinners, he died for us. He sent his son to die for us. We can love in accordance to the response of what God has demonstrated to us. So maybe in this wandering, in this season of reflection, maybe the question shouldn't be, oh God, how do I love thee? Let me count the ways. But maybe the reflection should be, oh Father, how much do you love me? Let me count the ways. And as I see the love the Father has demonstrated to me, my heart, my mind, my strength are inclined to reflect that love, to respond to the love that he first showed me. The Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you, be gracious to you, may turn his face towards you, grant you his peace. And may you reflect on what it truly means to love God. Be blessed.